everyone, and I'd like to start by just thanking the organizers of this conference for inviting me to speak today. It's a little bit of an unusual format, but I hope we can pull it off. So my name is Ann Lidgard. I'm Director and the Senior Advisor at Sweden's Innovation Agency. And the topic for my talk today is all about test beds and how they can be a really strategic part of an innovation ecosystem. But before I begin, I'd like to just start by saying a few words about Sweden and also introduce you to Vinnova, the Swedish Innovation Agency. Then I will talk about some of the test beds initiatives that we have running in Sweden, give you a few examples of test beds, maybe give you a few comments about lessons learned, and then finish with some last thoughts. So Sweden is, just like South Korea, well known for scoring high on various innovation scoreboards. And obviously there are many reasons for this, but one of the ones that are usually lifted apart from a broad and good education system is also the extensive investments in R&D that our countries make. 2/3 of the Swedish investments are from private investments, which also can be illustrated by the next slide, which really shows how Sweden is indeed a country of multinationals. I'm sure you recognize some of the brands here, not just old companies like Ericsson, which was founded in 1876, and SKF, Electrolux, IKEA, H&M, but you also find some more recent companies like Spotify, Klarna, and also Mojang in the middle there, which I think most of you probably more know as the creators of Minecraft. So Stockholm and Sweden is well known then also to have a world-class startup scene where given our small population, only 10 million people, we have produced many unicorns already, and we're supposedly be the second only to Silicon Valley when it comes to unicorns produced per capita. We were also named one of the 3 best startup ecosystems in the world by Spark Labs Group. And Stockholm was ranked number 2 after London by the European Digital City Index in their latest ranking, which was in 2016. So one can always speculate how have we come to this, but most people will probably say it's a combination of public policies encouraging tech adoption, broadband infrastructure, good education, and of course the role of role models is very important. And throughout this, we all know that we're facing huge global challenges which will require sustainable thinking on all levels. These issues have long been very important for Sweden. In fact, Sweden pioneered the first international conference for the environment already in 1972. And I think everybody by now has heard of Greta Thunberg with her Friday school strikes. More and more people are indeed realizing that we need to accelerate the pace of change, which is why you really need to adopt a holistic approach to innovation. Combining sustainable development with system innovation and collaboration. And collaboration is indeed very much the focus for Vinnova and our way of operating. But before I get into the topic of test beds, I'll, like I said earlier, just give you a few slides and some information about Vinnova as well. So Vinnova is a government agency reporting to the Ministry of Enterprise. Our role as innovation agency is to develop Sweden's innovation capacity by providing funding for various innovation projects and also by developing the innovation ecosystem as a whole. So our vision really is that Sweden should be and will be an innovative force in a sustainable world. Just also wanted to point out that Sweden is responsible for the EU contact points and also act as an expert agency for the government. We have offices in a few places. We have, of course, most of us are in Stockholm, but then we have a few people in Brussels, a person in Tel Aviv, and then we have an office in Silicon Valley. So our main instrument is really grant funding, government grants, and we of course put much emphasis on impact for society in the design of our grants. Our role is to alleviate the risk for actors on the path of innovation, but our role is also to orchestrate and develop and catalyze new developments. Through the design of many of our programs, we provide incentives for innovation through collaboration, because we really believe that that is truly a way to reach more of the impact that we are looking for. And here's a really good example of this collaborative effort. This is a project that brings together several large industrial actors, a university and startups, of course, as well. As you can see, this is in a mine, and it's a pilot to demonstrate fully automated, operator-free mining, and it combines the technology of Ericsson, of course, with 5G, Boliden, which is a Swedish mining company, Volvo Construction that makes the big heavy engines there, ABB, and of course Vinnova with some partial funding, and also the University of Luleå being part of this initiative. Just a few numbers, we're roughly around 200 co-workers at Vinnova. We have yearly about 4,000 active projects. Some projects, of course, are running over 5, 7, 10 years if they are centers of excellence. Others maybe just for a few months. So it's really a huge dynamics in the type of innovation projects that we fund. And our annual budget, roughly in dollars, would be something like maybe $300 million US, roughly speaking. And of course, the SDGs are very much a guiding principle for how we operate, which brings me now to the very high importance of startups, because small and medium-sized enterprises, they really play a crucial role for both addressing societal and environmental challenges, but also to challenge and complement the existing industries and businesses. They are extremely important to renew and also improve the public sector, not to forget this. Here, this is an example of a startup that's using satellite monitoring to optimize the fertilization of in the agrarian sector. So this is really important then to have a national innovation strategy that recognizes this and also supports and encourages the startups and the small, medium-sized enterprises on their innovation journey. So in Sweden, Vinnova, together with some other public agencies, we have a whole portfolio of different programs and initiatives to support the SMEs. You can read on the slide, it's a mix of grants, soft loans, investments. We develop continuously the incubator system in Sweden. We have now several industrial innovation hubs, all these collaborative initiatives that I've been talking about altogether, and of course, Testbeds. But just please bear with me one more slide before I get into the testbed, because I just wanted to just say a few words about this. I spent 6 years as head of Vinnova in Silicon Valley, and one of the real strengths there that I learned while I was heading the Vinnova office there was the mutual value of collaboration between established companies and startups. In Sweden, in order to accelerate this, which actually is quite a cultural change, we have been funding matchmaking activities like, for instance, Ignite Sweden. So Ignite Sweden has two main missions: to increase commercial collaboration between startups and corporates, but also to learn and to share the best practices about startup and corporate collaboration, because it really is a learning journey for both sides to learn how to collaborate efficiently. But it's been quite successful, and I won't go into all the numbers, but there have been more than almost 3,000 meetings taking place since April 2017 in 19 cities, 3 countries, and this has led to over 100 commercial collaborations. So getting into testbeds. So what are testbeds? Well, you find that there are many different forms, but they usually have a common purpose, and it is really to facilitate innovation. It's a component, a vital component of an innovation ecosystem. That's at least our point of view. And they gather everything from equipment and pilot machinery to policy labs and virtual and investigative environments. Testbeds are places where you can have experts, industries, problem owners, and users can all come together to expedite the development of tomorrow's innovations. And I think it's also important to remember that this is also a place for regulators to come and see and to have this interaction very early on, so that the regulatory framework can keep up with innovation. So I'm not going to read the definition there. You can find many different definitions on the web, but I just wanted to put on this slide because I think it's, if you want to simplify it, it can be characterized as something that is or made available, open to users outside of the testbed's own organization. Usually the testbed is in an organization already if it's already an established facility, but it's important that it's really made open and available. And of course it should have a duration long beyond the limit of an individual test project. It should be sort of an ongoing facility. It should also have an area of application that exceeds the boundaries of a single specific product, service, process, or user, and it is intended to test and develop new products, services, and processes. So it's not like a fixed display object or a demonstrator. And really, you can see it as a way of structuring and systematizing tests. So these are very useful for making specific testing processes more efficient by concentrating them to the same location, which is, of course, very beneficial for learning, and not least, again, like I said earlier, for interaction with regulatory bodies. So all these different test beds, so we've tried to structure and group them into a few different categories. We have laboratory environments. We talk about simulation facilities, and then we talk about real life environments. For instance, if you look at the picture on the slide here, you can see, for instance, the wind turbine technology test bed in cold climate way up in the north of Sweden. Here's an example of a lab environment for testing and analysis. This is Max 4 lab in Lund, which is a synchrotron. It's a facility for high intensity X-rays. And this is perfect for testing materials, also for getting certified for certifications. They have to withstand certain X-ray exposure. It's also a great facility for biotech research and many, many more purposes. So also, in order to really facilitate the access for SMEs, Vinnova have been funding part of the staff to help the startups and other SMEs to understand and how to use the facility. And I think this is really important point, because it's not always the SMEs that know exactly how to use a testing facility. So to have people on board that can be the link is very important. Here's an example of a simulated environment, AstaZero. It's the world's first full-scale independent test environment for future road safety. So the facility is unique in that the different traffic environments make it possible to test advanced safety systems and their function for all kinds of traffic and traffic situations. So this is really great for research, for development, certification, of course, of future road safety systems. And we've also seen that this functions as an international arena now open for vehicle manufacturers and suppliers and legislators, and we see universities from actually throughout the world. The name AstaZero comes from Active Safety Test Area, and Zero, which is the Swedish Parliament's vision for road safety, the vision zero, zero dead and seriously injured in traffic. And an example of a startup that actually has had a lot of benefits from working and testing its vehicles out there is Einride. that has developed a driverless electric truck and delivers transportation services. And here you see a picture now. They have working together with Schenker. And finally, here's an example of a real-life environment, also another one. This is the National Center for Radiation Therapy at the Uppsala Academic Hospital. This is for a testbed for innovative therapies, and it's a collaboration between all of the university hospitals in Sweden. So there are hundreds, actually, testbeds spread all over Sweden. But one of the important, let's say, aspects that was identified a few years ago by the government was that it's important that the awareness and the accessibility is made, is improved. So Vinnova was actually given the assignment to improve this through, so that the whole Swedish innovation ecosystem is more aware of these amazing facilities. So Vinnova has created what's called Testbeds Sweden. It's a digital platform, but we also have the responsibility of disseminating these all across Sweden. So I will try to share also, just to show you a little bit about the websites that we'll build up, so that you can see how easy it is to actually find things here. So this is actually on the Vinnova website. It explains a little bit about what's happening here, a little bit about Testbed Sweden. But then if you click here, you can actually show a whole compilation of the different test beds that exist, that are put into different types of categories here. So if you're interested in energy and environment, you can click here and find more of the different test beds that might be relevant for you. There's also another site that I hope that I can show you here, also called Testbeds Sweden. It's both in Swedish and in English, so please feel free to look around if you're a company that needs to try out things. Here again, you can filter your search results depending on what you need, if it's an isolated testbed, laboratory testbeds, etc., depending on industry and regions and so forth. So now let me quickly get back. So that was a little bit about the more technical test beds, or the digital test beds, but we've also realized that it would be very important also to open up the public sector as a test bed. And so we created a program 2 years ago, which is now running for 10 years, which will have roughly a budget of $100 million during this time for test beds in the public sector. And so the idea is to really stimulate the solutions on societal challenges can be tested in real life environments in the public sector, and thereby contribute to sustainable growth. So we really hope that this can also strengthen the innovation capacity in the public sector and create lasting structures and processes for more test opportunities and strengthened employee-driven innovation in the public sector. Here are a few of the projects that were announced in the first call. You can see it's a little bit spread all over Sweden. It's I'll read some of them. We have the autonomous airport in Örnsköldsvik. I think I mentioned earlier also the wind power in cold climate. We have pre-hospital care in Gothenburg, IoT for societal challenges in Halmstad, etc. So a nice portfolio of projects, and please feel free to reach out afterwards if you're interested in learning more about this. Oh, here are, sorry, I forgot, here are also the ones that were implemented since 2019. So quite a large range of different type of test beds. So what have we learned so far from having run test beds and also developed test bed programs? Well, it's really important to think about the funding, of course. I mean, that's crucial. That's where it all starts. Is it a public-private type of funding? What is the business model long-term? Is there a sustainable business model, or are the externalities large enough for this to be a publicly funded test bed? Also very important to think about the choice of host environment. Is there really long-term commitment for this? Is there an alignment when it comes to strategies? Very often when it comes to new types of test beds, it's important to have an orchestrating partner, or somebody who actually brings the different collaborators together, or starts, forming the initiative. And in some cases, this has been Vinnova. In other cases, this has happened regionally, the regional governments. But at least that's an important role, especially to catalyze new test beds. And of course, last, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, very important also to have a national coordinating partner, or national coordination. Some organization really needs to take the responsibility to increase the awareness, but also to make sure that the availability is there. So that's a little bit about test beds, but I also wanted to show you here, this is a hybrid test bed, one could say. This is BioVenture Hub, or operated by AstraZeneca, which is the big pharmaceutical company. And why do I call it a hybrid test bed? Hybrid test bed and industrial hub. Just like many of the industrial hubs, startups are welcome to co-locate here with the company. But what's unusual here is that they are also welcome to use all of the lab facilities, just as if they were part of the AstraZeneca R&D team. And this is a really interesting example of this sort of a hybrid example. Speaking of industrial hubs, I think it's also important to look at them. I talked a lot about test beds today, but industrial hubs are also a very important part of the ecosystem. And this is exemplified by the ABB operated Synnerleap in Västerås, just an hour west of Stockholm. Synnerleap is an innovation growth hub with the aim to create an ecosystem for collaboration and help startups with customers to help startups to win customers, to scale and to grow. So if, as a startup, if you're adopted by the program here, you can have access to a concierge that will help you navigate within all of the ABB group. You will be able to engage in pilots and proof of concept projects, and ultimately you may even be able to receive investments from the ABB corporate VC. So there are many different steps here in how a startup can interact with ABB. So this brings me a little bit to the conclusion of my talk. I want to leave you though with one important slide, and this is really how important now, if we really are going to make impact in the future and achieve real change, one of the types of new projects that Vinnova is trying to orchestrate and get aboard are real life system demonstrators. And here's just an example of what that might be. It could be, for instance, the totally sustainable harbor, where you will, you can bring together shifts in business models. Here you have the autonomous connected vehicles, of course, which is the part, the technology part, sustainable transports, innovation in control systems, procurement, regulatory framework, behavior, all of this put together, but in really a real large scale system change demonstrator. And so this is where the Swedish government and Vinnova and many other partners in Sweden now are looking at how can we take some steps in order to achieve this. So that concludes my talk. So Thank you very much for listening. I hope you find this useful, and please reach out if you need to get a hold of me or anybody else from my organization. Thank you very much.